Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about money and how it inspires greed and how it's also the human pursuit of survival. I often wonder in my quiet moments, why do we chase money with such desperation? I watch friends and strangers pursue wealth with almost a religious devotion, and honestly, I find myself puzzled. When I think about it, having or not having money has never really changed how I experience the world at its core. The feeling of morning dew on grass, rain pattering on a tin roof, or biting into a perfectly ripe mango. These simple joys remain the same whether my bank account is full or empty. Of course, extreme poverty changes everything. When you're hungry, homeless, or sick without healthcare. But once our basic needs are met, why does the pursuit of wealth never seem to end? Why can't we figure out when we have enough? We seem to have built a world where everything, even food, water, and shelter, comes with a price tag. Our economy supposedly makes these essentials affordable, but humans seem strangely unable to calculate how much is enough. This isn't a new thing. The hoarding instinct has always been present throughout history. We've collected seashells and silk fabrics and shiny metals like gold that serve no practical purpose. And it began as a genuine survival concern, and it transformed into something else. It transformed into a craving that goes far beyond what we actually need. And on one level, it makes sense. We fear death and instinctively try to survive, following any path that might increase our chances. But we're terrible at calculating how much we truly need. How many resources does one person require to survive? How long will we live? What disasters might tomorrow bring? In these shadow scenarios, which are often born from fear, we start hoarding. We start preparing for catastrophes that mostly exist in our minds. We humans have this strange relationship with enough. I notice it in myself and others. This moving target just keeps shifting beyond our reach, like just beyond our reach. You'd think that we could calculate it at some point. Enough food to stay healthy, enough shelter to stay safe, enough money for necessities, plus a reasonable buffer, yet we can't seem to nail it down. There's a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. So, to explore this, think about the last time you wanted something very badly. Maybe it was a new phone, a promotion, or a certain amount of savings in your account. Do you remember the anticipation before you got it? And do you remember the excitement when you finally got it? And then, almost inevitably, that satisfaction fades. And it once felt like a luxury, and then it suddenly became normal. The dopamine rush disappears. This shifting baseline syndrome explains why billionaires still strive for more billions. From the outside, it seems absurd. What could you possibly do with that much money? But from the inside, their adapted reality, they are just securing their position. They're just trying to keep a couple of billions in their bank account just in case disaster strikes. They're trying to stay competitive, and they're kind of also trying to meet the new normal of their peer group. And I wonder sometimes if this is why traditional cultures often had rituals of feasting and fasting, giving and sacrifice. I do think that maybe they understood this human tendency to constantly gather and constantly reset our gauge of enough, and built in social mechanisms to recalibrate it. Today, in our endless growth economy, these recalibration points have largely disappeared. They leave our sense of enough to drift in any direction we choose. More often than not, it's up. Ayn Rand once said that money is only a tool. It will take you wherever you wish, but it will not replace you as the driver. The problem starts when we forget who's supposed to be in control. We can't let money control us. The philosopher Erich Fromm suggested that greed often emerges from existential anxiety and fear of insignificance. When we gather wealth to prove we exist, we try to gain some control in an uncertain world. And these thoughts made me wonder, can greed really exist without fear? Initially, I thought, no, greed can't exist without fear. But then I considered another angle. Greed can exist alongside ambition. The hunger for power or status does fuel greedy behavior precisely because these pursuits have no stopping point either. There's never enough achievement, enough power, or enough status. We always want more. creating the perfect conditions for greed to flourish. In today's world, money symbolizes both power and status. These two things most humans deeply want now come together in one package, giving money this almost godlike quality. Because now we think with money, I can do anything, I can buy anything, I can be anyone. I've been trying to pull away from this mass hypnosis for a long time, and I've seen how the pursuit of wealth creates hollow people who chase money while sacrificing their souls and real connections. Eventually, one can realize that there is no net big enough to catch the world and all its egos. Maybe some greater force, you call it like divine intervention or the zeitgeist, will balance things out naturally. But I'm not giving up this chase. I'm just trying to see things clearly. I also feel like in all the philosophy I've read, there is no philosopher that has given so much importance to earning money. And if we look at the evolution of money in human society, it's quite fascinating because what started as a survival tool has now become quite symbolic in our society. The economist Thorstein Veblen introduced the concept of conspicuous consumption, where people display wealth not because of practical reasons, but to show off social status. People try to gain respect and make others envious through visible signs of affluence. Now, Veblen's insight is interesting because he says that the wealthy don't spend money to meet their needs. They deliberately spend money to engage in wasteful consumption precisely because it shows they can afford non-productive activities or useless activities. The less practical an item is, the better it works as a status symbol. Now, this chasing after useless items, it creates a strange dynamic where things gain value not because they're useful, but because they're impractical. And if we think about the formal dining situation with specialized utensils for every food type, like a fork or a spoon is enough, really, or fashion that prioritizes looks over comfort, the wealthy people cultivate these impractical tastes deliberately because if they use their money efficiently, it would suggest they have constraints and they want to distance themselves from that perception. Conspicuous consumption is still at large, and now it's gone digital. Veblen could have never imagined Instagram, but he would immediately recognize its function. We've transformed displaying physical goods on our lawns to curating digital evidence of our spending power. The vacation photo that affluent people post is not a simple capturing memories or we had such a good time. It's also about capturing the right angle of the infinity pool at an exclusive resort or a beach in a far off country that you have to spend a lot of money even to fly to. It shows that they can afford to be there. Their coffee isn't just coffee, it's this $15 artisanal pour over in this distinctive cup everyone recognizes, and it's carefully positioned to their laptop where they're working, quote unquote. What's fascinating about digital consumption is how it's simultaneously more accessible and more exhausting than traditional displays of wealth. You don't actually need wealth to participate. You just need a camera angle that suggests wealth. The college student living on ramen can save for a luxury purchase and then photograph it from multiple angles to create this impression of abundant wealth across months of content. These status display messages have just increased our anxiety. We're not keeping up with our immediate neighbors anymore, but we're kind of keeping up with people across the globe. And our entire life competes with an endless stream of seemingly perfect moments from countless lives that you'll never actually witness in full. And unlike the physical goods that Veblen examined, digital status symbols require constant refreshing. The luxury watch might impress for years, but the luxury vacation post fades into irrelevance within days. This creates a treadmill of consumption that must be documented to count. It seems like we're spending real money for increasingly unreal status markers, and it feeds a system that demands constant participation, but also offers diminishing returns on our investment of both emotional and financial capital. If we could really peek into the lives of the ultra-wealthy, we would probably find a deep-seated anxiety, because the more someone owns, the more they fear losing it. And this paranoia seeps into every aspect of life. Some people who have a lot of money can't even trust family members who might secretly want pieces of their fortune or their estate. Friendships always come with a hint of favor seeking, leaving wealthy people never quite sure who's genuine or who's manipulating them. Love becomes equally complicated. Do they love me or my money? This problem has troubled the powerful throughout history. Aristocrats, nobles, royalties all face this dilemma. Far from being just an inconvenience, it becomes a constant exercise in evaluation and analysis. And the way wealth transforms relationships deserves deeper explorations. Imagine suddenly coming into a great fortune, winning the lottery or building a successful company or inheriting wealth, and the people who knew you before remain, but something fundamental shifts in how they interact with you. Your sister, who never asked for financial help, now mentions her struggling business. New acquaintances seem overly interested in your work, subtly trying to sense your financial situation. These small interactions accumulate and it creates this little barrier of suspicion. I knew someone who inherited moderate wealth from a grandparent, and he told me that the most painful part wasn't managing the money, but realizing how it changed his relationships. Childhood friends began treating him differently, sometimes with resentment, sometimes with expectation. Dating became a minefield of uncertainty. He said, I never know if they're interested in me or what I can provide. Perhaps the cruelest irony is that wealth, which many pursue to feel more connected and secure, often creates emotional isolation instead. The very abundance that should allow for a greater generosity and connection becomes a wall that separates. The ultra wealthy often end up socializing exclusively with others in their financial bracket, not necessarily because they're snobby, but because these are the only people where money isn't the unspoken third party in every interaction. Max Weber, the sociologist, adds another perspective. In his work, The Protestant Work Ethic and Capitalism, he argues that the pursuit of wealth can also be seen as a moral obligation, a duty to increase one's fortune as evidence of virtue and divine blessing. This can also challenge our idea that the desire for money comes only from fear or greed or other such negative emotions. Weber observed that Protestant people, especially Calvinists, viewed worldly success as a sign of God's favor and predestination. And this religious framework transformed wealth accumulation from a potential sin into a religious duty. And honestly, this helped shape modern capitalism's morals foundations, something that we experience to this day. And if we talk about envy, it often feels like the envy towards wealthy people often seems misplaced, because why be jealous of someone with more resources? Perhaps we assume their lives must be better, at least from our limited outside view. Perhaps the power they have over us feels oppressive, and we wish we had similar influence. Eventually, it boils down to this desire for total control. We want freedom, we want pleasure, we want leisure, and we wrongly believe money provides all three. In today's world, business consumes most people's time, regardless of wealth. The rule of business is persistence. Those who've generated wealth through business activities fear losing it, and they must keep operations running. They manage people, they secure funding, attend meetings, and travel extensively, even if they fly business class or private jets. A person who must continuously serve a system's demands remains trapped within the system. They're not free, no matter how wealthy they are. It's like a lion devouring all their time. The drive to engage in such activities comes from self-preservation, in this case, preserving their wealth. But what has been true for centuries remains true now. Money cannot buy happiness, though it can eliminate certain forms of unhappiness. Studies consistently show that money increases happiness, but once your needs are met, doesn't really make much of a difference. Money cannot buy love, though it can purchase moments where people pretend to love you. Money cannot buy health, though it can offer more opportunities to heal and manage illness. And most importantly, no amount of money has ever purchased a single second of time. Regarding leisure, a wealthy person might seem to have more free time than someone working long hours at manual labor, but do they really? The economist Adam Smith discusses how wealth provides certain freedoms but also brings responsibilities and obligations that don't necessarily translate to more leisure time. The gaps in leisure time and working conditions between social classes are enormous. People in lower economic groups must struggle for basics like housing, clean food, and water that wealthy people take for granted. The question of ease of survival emerges again, and thus it makes people ambitious to climb the social ladder, and that's completely understandable. This growing wealth gap that is present in our society is something we have to confront. It's become a pressing issue. And according to recent reports, while nearly 5 billion people have grown poorer since 2020, the five richest men in the world have doubled their fortunes to $869 billion. That's an astonishing rate of $14 million per hour. Jeez. Billionaire wealth surged in 2024, with the combined fortunes of the world's richest increasing from 13 trillion to 15 trillion in just 12 months. And that's trillion. Meanwhile, the number of people living in poverty has barely changed since 1990. This insane inequality highlights the systemic issues that perpetuate both the desire for money and the illusion of control it offers. The concentration of wealth in few hands not only worsens social and economic disparities, but it fuels the misplaced envy that many feel towards the ultra-rich. Thomas Piketty, an economist, argues that increasing wealth inequality isn't an accident, but a feature of capitalism itself. His research shows that return on capital typically exceeds the rate of economic growth, and this leads to wealth concentration over time. And so the notion is challenged that wealth naturally trickles down to benefit everyone, and instead suggests the system inherently favors those who already possess capital. And the social implications of this inequality, they go far beyond economics. Studies are consistently showing that countries with more income inequality tend to have lower social mobility, poorer health outcomes, and higher crime rates. And these issues raise fundamental questions about fairness, opportunity, and the government's role in the proper distribution of wealth. In this context, the desire for money is now about navigating systemic forces that perpetuate this inequality. But there have always been pockets of human society where wealth wasn't the primary status marker. These systems can offer intriguing alternatives to our money-obsessed measures of worth. In some traditional systems, wisdom and expertise carry more weight than material possessions. I'm reminded of certain indigenous cultures where elders gain status not through accumulation, but through their ability to solve problems and share essential knowledge. Their value comes from what they give away, which is teaching, counsel, stories, rather than what they hoard. Creative communities often function in a similar way, very different from modern capitalism. Among musicians, writers, or artists, technical skill and innovation are often more important than financial success in the status hierarchy. The starving artist who maintains integrity earns respect that the sellout millionaire may never receive from their peers. So what if he's rich, but he sold himself out? This person's poor, but at least he's honest to the art. Service-oriented status systems exist too. In some religious and volunteer communities, the highest status goes to those who serve most selflessly. Even in our digital age, new status metrics are emerging. The open source software communities, which contribute to shared projects, value what matters more than personal gain. They share expertise freely in forums and educational content that creates reputation and influence that just cannot be bought. Now, what's striking about these alternative systems is that they often feel more satisfying to participants. They tend to be based on qualities that don't deplete through sharing. Knowledge grows when taught. Creativity expands through collaboration. Care multiplies through giving. Unlike money, which divides when shared, these alternatives create expanding rather than zero-sum games. And if we go back to our anxiety around wealth, I wonder if this stems from instinctively knowing we're using the wrong measuring stick. We're trying to fill the needs for meaning, connection, and purpose with money, which is a tool that's fundamentally unsuited to those tasks. Perhaps the hunger for more money is not really about money, but about what we hope it might provide if we have enough. I think power structures have always existed and always will. Humanity has not reached a place where complete self-governance seems possible. Our diverse functions naturally create hierarchies, building systems where financial control becomes the primary method of managing society. And we participate in the system because we're not forced to do it, but it's through this constant fulfillment of our manufactured desires. Somehow we're made to want to do it. And this subtle approach to control works much more than this obvious domination and dictatorship rule. We kind of also become participants in this system that's not serving our needs. Now, this has been a longer episode than normal, so as we near the end of our exploration, we should reconsider the freedom and leisure that money provides. If we talk about leisure, isn't true leisure the ability to decide how we use our time? This connects to Aristotle's concept of human flourishing. He argued that genuine happiness comes from living virtuously and excellently, not from pursuing wealth or pleasure. This suggests that authentic leisure is the freedom to engage in meaningful and fulfilling activities. Money is something we receive after providing something of value to the economy. But why do we do anything at all? Acquiring money or accumulating wealth aren't inherently meaningful activities. There needs to be a deeper intention. For example, like the Protestant ethic that we mentioned earlier, duty or providing for a family or funding our passions. These are examples of why people engage in earning money. These intentions form the foundations of our actions and connect directly to the process of living. To pursue money solely for its own sake creates an empty shell. Though this shell may be golden, it lacks a certain purpose that affirms life. Meaning and fulfillment emerge from engaging with genuine, honest intentions that come from inside ourselves. And money might facilitate this process, but it's a means to an end, and it should never become the end itself. If we move beyond this critique into practice, how might a healthier relationship to money look? I personally am still trying to figure it out, but there are several approaches that I've noticed that help people maintain perspective. One of the things that I try to do is I define how much is enough, and I consciously write it down, and it creates a powerful reference point. I know people who've calculated their actual financial needs: housing, food, healthcare, education, reasonable leisure, and a little bit of a safety margin, and then mark that number is enough. And some of them, they made that much money and they quit, and they are living simple lives. Another way is regularly reconnecting with non-monetary sources of wealth. These look like time in nature, where no amount of money changes how beautiful the sunset looks, or how the ocean sounds, or how beautiful the forest is. These experiences can also recalibrate our senses towards what's important. And considering the environmental degradation that's happening today, I think it's even more important that we do this. Also, showing up in relationships and deepening them instead of showing off our relationships, and reminding us what we actually need to fill our emotional wells. Sometimes creative expression can also be this kind of wealth, which doesn't have to be performative or it doesn't have to reach an end, but it just feels good to create something that comes from your own being. Some people try to find clarity through artificial scarcity. So they take periods of intentional simplicity where they temporarily live below their means, whether it's through fasting from unnecessary purchases, or practicing forms of minimalism, or periodic technology sabbaticals. There's also this Indonesian practice of Nyepi, which is a day in the year where you completely shut off everything. You don't use electricity, you don't use your phones, you don't use tablets, and you don't buy anything, and you are basically just existing that day. And after having tried it once, I can recommend it. And finally, there's tremendous power in actually redirecting our competitive instincts away from accumulation. Communities that compete to give most generously, solve problems most creatively, or support each other most effectively, they channel the same human drives that fuel wealth seeking towards more collectively beneficial ends. None of these approaches are trying to deny money's practical utility or suggest that we shouldn't use it or we shouldn't let it meet our needs. They simply help prevent money from occupying the center of our value system, keeping it in its proper place as a servant rather than the master of our deeper purposes. And this is why the wisdom of wealth isn't figuring out how to get more, but figuring out what money can do and what money cannot do, and then organizing our lives and priorities accordingly. Because if we give too much importance to money, then the gentleness of life becomes lost to us. Like a delicate spring flower or a vanishing morning dew, we fail to notice it, and we reach a point where we wonder what to do, realizing it's too late. There was a poem that I wrote which had these lines: "I wish I had known this earlier, when there might have been time to save me. I have gained money but lost something invisible and free. It used to be a guiding light. Now it's only misery." And this trade of authenticity for security might be one of the most destructive exchanges of our time. The philosopher Immanuel Kant discussed moral worth, and he argued that true happiness comes from acting according to moral duty and not from external circumstances like wealth. And this thought can challenge our assumptions that those with more money necessarily lead better lives. Because a good life is spent doing what one loves, with those one loves. Let's not fall into the trap of choosing financial security over human connection. No one on their deathbed wished they had accumulated more wealth or worked longer hours. They wished for more moments with their children, their parents, and those leisurely times spent in nature or simply being. We've become so fixated on doing that we forget being forms the foundation of all we do. If we did not exist, we could not act. If we were not, we could not do. Sometimes I don't want to write or do all the things I'm expected to do, even from myself. "Then what do you want to do?" a voice asks. "Nothing," I reply. "I want to let it all happen." Not everyone can let it happen, of course. But what if they could? What if we all embraced the beautiful possibility of allowing things to unfold naturally? Would the world still look the same? My mind wants to drift in a realm beyond thoughts, and writing sometimes brings it back down, a necessary tether to this world, as I feel myself slowly lifting off. Perhaps this is the ultimate wealth, the freedom to simply be. I thank you all for listening, and until next time.